The night sky over Ganymede Station looked almost too perfect to be real. It was a velvet expanse with Jupiter's orange glow shining through it. Dr. Nora Hayes put her forehead against the viewport to try to calm the thoughts that were racing through her mind. It wasn't the quiet of space that bothered her. It was the message she got that morning. Project Amber Hatch has begun. A team of engineers and biomechanics worked round the clock in the huge hangar below her. Their mission sounded like a real-life conspiracy theory. To create a robotic baby dragon with alien technology that could sneak into other worlds without being seen. The Galactic Union saw the Dragonling as more than just a weapon. It was the perfect spy. Nora stepped into the elevator after adjusting the Neuralink headset that hung round her neck. The station's power core made a faint vibration that pulsed through the metal floor as the doors hissed shut. The lift dropped quickly, and her stomach dropped as she went down to the lab, which smelled faintly of ozone and steel. The lab shone in sterile blues and silvers when the doors opened. In the middle, there was a clear incubation chamber that looked like a crystal teardrop. A small creature curled up inside. Its scales brushed platinum, and its wings folded like delicate blades. A dim amber light throbbed where a heart might be, and its chest rose and fell in a slow rhythm. Commander Drix, the station's alien liaison, said, "Looks almost alive." His voice clicked on some consonants, which is how his kind always did. The glow of the chamber reflected off of Drix's black eyes, which had no whites. Nora said, "It is alive, at least half alive. The cybernetic implants are working perfectly with the organic matrix." The Dragonling was named Eris 9, which means chaos and precision. It was more than just machinery. It was made to imitate feelings, learn languages, and sneak into the courts of enemy kingdoms without being noticed. It was a child of two worlds, flesh and circuit. Drex turned his head. "You know the risk. The crowned dominion will do anything to stop you from building what you are." Nora let out a breath and watched as condensation swirled around her visor. "That's why we're ahead of schedule." But they weren't far enough ahead. 2 weeks later, alarms broke the silence of midnight. Red lights flashed through the station's hallways like angry hearts. Nora ran out of her room, her lab coat flapping and her heart racing. The security AI said something that made her shiver over the intercom. "Breach in Sector 12. An authorized entry. Sector 12, Eris 9's room." When she got there, the glass hatch was open, and pieces of it sparkled on the floor like frozen rain. There was nothing in the cradle. Drix stood still, his forearms in the shape of drawn swords. He hissed, "The Crown Dominion. They've found us." A holographic feed came to life above the console. It showed a group of sleek, black-armored figures moving like shadows through the maintenance docks. A strange banner shone behind them. It had a silver crown surrounded by thorns. Nora said out loud, "They're not just here to mess things up. They're here to get it." Drix's eyes got sharper. The Dragonling is no longer just a spy. It is a weapon of an empire in their hands. Hours later, Eris 9 was still inside a containment pod on the Dominion flagship Obsidian Wraith. The scientists on the other side of the wall whispered about its possible uses as they walked around it. Kale, the youngest of them, reached out and ran a clawed finger over the Dragonling's metal forehead. "It's beautiful," Kale said softly, "but not done. The core of its power is missing." "The core isn't missing," said the Dominion High Chancellor as he stepped forward. "It needs an energy stone, which is a crystal of pure star essence. We have one." He showed a shard that was as bright as a prism and pulsed with light from stars that had died. The other heart was a famous stone. The Dragonling would not only wake up, it would also grow. Kel's pupils got smaller. "If we raise it, it will stick to us, not the Union." "Exactly," the Chancellor said, his smile curling up like smoke. "We will teach it to be loyal. We will teach it how to fight." Nora stared at the empty cradle on Ganymede Station, her fingers digging into her scalp. The obsidian wraith was sliding into dark space, and its engines were hidden from view by satellite scans. She knew the truth like a knife in her chest. Eris 9 was gone, and the Dominion would not see it as just a tool. Drix put a hand on her shoulder that felt cool and oddly comforting. It's not gone. They made the child learn. It might still remember who gave it life. Nora looked at him with her jaw set. Then we look for it, before it learns how to kill for them. Kale put the other heart into the dragonling's chest cavity in a room filled with violet starlight far away. A wave of dazzling light filled the room. Eris 9's eyes flew open, and the molten gold irises lit up with a crackle of static. It spread its wings, which were now covered in veins of living light. A low, musical roar shook the ship. Kale could feel the sound in his bones. The baby dragon was up, and it was hungry. Kale had seen battle cruisers blow up in the quiet of space, and had stood in front of the burning cities of moons he had conquered. But nothing made him feel as uneasy as the noise that filled the containment chamber. The hatchling's roar wasn't loud in the usual way. It was a sound that shook bones and blood. The reinforced alloy walls of the obsidian wraith hummed with it, and the lights flickered in time with it. Kale held on tighter to the containment rail. The little dragon, which was only as big as a big dog, was no longer the silver-grey embryo they had caught. The other heart beat in its chest like a tiny sun. New plates of shimmering cobalt armor spiraled out from its spine, and blue plasma licked the edges of its wings in thin tongues. "It's growing," Kale said in a hoarse voice. High Chancellor Varros moved closer, and his cloak dragged sparks across the shiny floor. "Good," he said with a cold smile. The other heart was supposed to make potential bigger. We just started to feed it. The hatchling's eyes, which were made of molten gold, looked at Kale. When it tilted its head, its pupils turned into a perfect vertical slit. Kale felt a pull, not a physical one, but something older and stranger. A request. Varros didn't see. He was talking to the science officers about calibrating the neurosync harness, which would directly imprint Dominion loyalty into the creature's developing neural web. Kale swallowed hard. If we force a loyalty bind too soon, we might hurt its mind, he said, surprising himself with the protest. Varros's look was as sharp as a plasma blade. It doesn't have a mind, only a function, strategist. Don't confuse smart programming with a soul. Kale wasn't sure, though. There was interest and something like awareness in the way those golden eyes followed him. Dr. Nora Hayes was in the Ganymede Station war room, looking at a three-dimensional map of Dominion territory. Dark crescents had formed under her eyes from not getting enough sleep. Drix stood next to her with his forearms crossed. He said, "Their ship burns light, without a quantum beacon. Tracking is almost impossible." Nora said, "We still have the embryo's biosignature. Its hybrid tissue gives off a unique trace, if we adjust the sensors." Drix said softly, "You think the creature wants to be found?" Nora thought for a moment. She really did believe it. Eris 9 was more than just a machine. It had learned her voice in the incubation chamber, and reacted to her heartbeat like a baby bird would to its mother. She said, "It knows me, and I know it." Drix nodded his head, which was a very small sign that he agreed. "Then we don't hunt with force, but with sound. We hear." After the other scientists had left, Kale went back into the chamber on the obsidian wraith. The dragoning, whose name was Eris 9, but Kale didn't know it, stood on legs that had just been strengthened. It turned its head to look at him. "You are not just a weapon, are you?" he said in a low voice. The creature's throat made a low trill that sounded like a question. Kale took a ration bar out of his belt pouch and held it out. It was dried protein for soldiers. The dragoning sniffed the air, and then quickly licked it with a metallic tongue. It didn't eat, but it got closer, and its eyes glowed with a soft warmth. Kale realized that he didn't need food, He needed energy. The other heart gives you food. The creature blinked slowly, as if to say, "You're right." Kale sat on the cold deck with his legs crossed and looked at it. "What should I call you? The Chancellor will give you a big war name. But..." He thought about it for a while. "What about Lumen? Light in the dark." The dragonling made a sound that was very close to a laugh. Varos called Kale to the command deck for the next cycle. "Strategist. We will deploy in 3 days. The Corrivian moonfront is our goal. The creature will lead the attack." Kale got tense. "It's still a kid." Varos yelled. "It's a weapon, and it will listen." Kale made fists behind his back. He knew better than to argue again. But he felt a quiet defiance inside him. Kale came back to the room later, when the ship's lights went out for the fake night. Lumen purred softly and steadily when he saw him. He put a hand on the containment field. "They want to turn you into something awful," he said softly. "But you don't have to be what they think." Lumen pushed its nose against the wall. A soft hum went through the field and into Kale's hand, matching the beat of his heart. Then, to his surprise, a voice touched his mind. Not words, but a pattern of thoughts. "Kale. Home. Free." He jerked back, his heart racing. You can talk." A flash of gold light crossed Lumen's eyes. "Home. Not here." Kale let out a shaky breath. "Where is home?" He saw blue-white labs, a woman with kind eyes, and music he had never heard before. Kale whispered, "That's your creator, the scientist. Find her." Nora woke up suddenly from a half-dream on Ganymede Station, her heart racing. For a split second, she thought she heard a soft, musical chirp in her head. Eris, she thought, holding her breath. A nearby monitor flickered, sending out an untraceable signal spike that looked like a heartbeat in the dark. Drix came in because of the alarm. He said simply, "You felt it too." Nora nodded. "It's reaching from me." Drix gave out a set of fragile tools. "Then we follow the sound." 3 days later, the Obsidian Wraith came out of slipstream over the Corrivian moonfront. Dominion warships formed a black crown round it. Kale stood next to Varos on the command bridge, his heart heavy. Lumen was waiting in the deployment hangar below them, with her wings arched and plasma dancing between the tips. The neurosync harness sparkled, ready to bind its will. "Start activation," Varos said. Kale's breath stopped. He thought about the vision Lumen had shown him, with those kind human eyes and the feeling of home. "No," Kale said all of a sudden. Varos turned round, his eyes full of cold rage. "Tell me what's going on. If you pull too hard on the harness, you could make the other heart unstable. It could wipe out the whole fleet." Varos was unsure. "You make the danger seem worse than it is." Kale moved closer and spoke more quietly. "Sir, a chain is weakest when it doesn't pay attention to what it holds. We made this creature more than we planned. Let me take the lead. Let me be the link." Varos looked at him closely, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Finally, he nodded quickly. "Okay, you will be in charge of the bond. If you fail, you both die." Kale went down to the hangar, his heart racing. Lumen saw him coming and his golden eyes lit up with recognition. He whispered, "They want me to control you," and turned on the interface cuffs. "But we both know you don't need a leash." The dragonling bowed its head that he could put on the nullband. A flood of pictures came to Kel's mind right away, stars spinning, the smell of ozone, and the woman Nor again. "Please help me." "I will," Kale promised. "But we have to move quickly." As the Dominion fleet got ready to attack, alarms went off above Corrivian skies. Kale climbed onto Lumen's back, and the metal felt warm under his hands. The doors of the hangar opened to the dark that went on forever. He said, "Let's give them a show." Lumen jumped into space, and the air around her ionized and snapped her wings wide. As they flew past the first line of enemy satellites, a blue plasma tail followed them like a comet. Dominion pilots cheered over the radio, thinking it was obedience. "Start the purge," Varos's voice rang out. But instead of diving straight at Corrivian defenses, Lumen turned hard and went off the battle path. "What are you up to?" a pilot yelled. Kale smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "Choosing our own battle." He felt Lumen's agreement like a flash of light. Home. Nora's console at Ganymede Station went off with alarms. Drix ran in when the long-range sensors picked up a bright streak that she knew was a fusion signature. "It's Eris-9, she said softly. Drix turned his head, and it isn't the only one. She could barely hear a human life sign mixed in with the dragons through the data haze. Anyone who rode with her creation was putting everything on the line. Nora put a shaking hand on the screen. "Wait," she said softly. "I'm coming." The Dominion fleet was far behind them and was in a state of chaos. High Chancellor Varos watched the rogue signal disappear into the dark between stars. His anger was a silent supernova. "Find them," he said in a low voice. Not matter how far. But Kale and Lumen were already out of his reach in the endless night. They were two fugitives bound by a new trust, racing toward a reunion that neither of them fully understood but both could feel. The battle for the hatchling's soul had begun. The slipstream tunnel shook and glowed like a living thing as Lumen pushed harder, her wings cutting through folds of bent space. Kale held onto the dragonling's neck plating. The air around him shimmered with heat from her thruster veins. "We're out of their range," Kale said out loud, but the vacuum took his voice. Lumen's mind answered with a pulse of golden light. "Safe, for now." There was a hint of tiredness in the words. Kale could feel it through their connection, a deep, heavy tiredness. He stroked the smooth metallic scales where organic tissue met alloy and said, "We'll find a place to rest." A group of stars far away lit up on his nav display. One winked more brightly than the others, sending out a familiar sound. Lumen felt it too and turned her head a little. "Home." Kel's breath stopped. "That signal, it's her, isn't it?" There was a quiet trill in response. Dr. Nora Hayes tracked that same resonance from far away, her fingers flying over the Ganymede Station's flight console. Drix stood next to her, using all four of his arms to move holographic maps with perfect accuracy. Drix said, "You found the dragon's unique biofrequency." Nora agreed. "But it's not just Eris. There's another signal mixed in with it. A person." Drix's black eyes got a little smaller. "Maybe a soldier from the Dominion. Maybe. They don't want to stop Eris, whoever they are. They're helping." Drix thought about it quietly and tilted his head. "Then maybe the hatchling has already made its first choice." Nora's chest felt tight with a mix of fear and relief. She typed in the coordinates. "Make a plan. I'm not making them wait if they're reaching for me." Lumen came out of the slipstream above a planetoid that had never been seen before and shone like dark glass. Icy rings broke into pieces and sparkled in a shallow orbit, sending out bursts of light in a rainbow of colors. The thin atmosphere of the planet tickled the hull plates, Kale thought. They went down to a valley with crystal-like spires running through it. As Kale got off his horse, the air was full of static, and the ground pulsed softly under his boots. He whispered, "It's alive," as he looked at the tall crystal structures. Lumen folded her wings and lowered her head to nuzzle the tallest spire. A soft hum spread through the valley like a heartbeat. Kel felt it too, a deep, resonant thrum that went along with the other heart's beat. "Here, rest," Lumen said. Kel fell to the ground and watched as weak energy waves moved between the crystals and the dragonling's chest. Light moved over her body, fixing tiny cracks in her armor. "You found this place by instinct," he said, "like it's a part of you, not me." "All of them," Kel frowned. "Who all?" But the answer never came, at least not in words. Instead, visions filled his head, ancient beings of starlight shaping worlds and spreading seeds of crystalline energy across the galaxy. A people who have been lost to time, leaving only echoes. Kel's hands were shaking when the pictures went away. "You carry their memory," he said softly. "You are more than anyone thought." Alarms went off in the war room on Ganymede Station. Dominion patrols had crossed the outer rim to look for their missing weapon. Drix said, "They've spread ships out over 3 sectors. They will notice us if we don't. Sneak up on them." Nora pulled the straps of her harness tighter in the pilot's seat of the scout ship Roar Vale. "Then we stay in the dark. If they find Eris before I do." Drix finished what she was thinking. "The creature will have to choose between living and being free. We have to get there first." Kel woke up to the soft sound of static. It was dark in the valley now, and the crystals glowed faintly like stars that were asleep. Lumen was crouched down close by, her golden eyes on the sky. "What is it?" Kale asked as he stood up. She made a sharp, low-frequency chirp that echoed in his chest. Then Kale heard it too, the engine's distant hum. A Dominion scout frigate flew through the upper atmosphere, its lights scanning the valley. Kale felt a chill run through his body. "They found us, hide or fight." Lumen asked through their link, and her wings were half open. Kale looked over the jagged crystals that made up the landscape. "We can't fight them face to face. Not yet. We need something to do." Lumen's eyes lit up with a sneaky light. Altogether, she pulled back and shot a focused burst of plasma into the biggest crystal spire. The explosion sounded like thunder and sent a storm of bright shards into the air. The scout frigate turned sharply because the sensors were overwhelmed by the sudden burst of energy. Kil jumped on Lumen's back. "Go." Lumen flew up into the sky with one beat of her wings, weaving through the falling crystal shards like a flash of lightning. A few seconds later, the Aurora Veil caught the energy spike. As the readout got clearer, Nora's heart raced. "That's definitely Eris." Drix made changes to the sensor array. "Another ship is close by. Dominion. Then we don't have a lot of time." Nora held onto the controls and pushed the ship to its limits. The scout frigate was chasing Kale and Lumen as they broke through the cloud cover into open space. Plasma bolts shot by, making a sizzling sound as they hit the void. "Get out of the way," Kale yelled, but Lumen was already ahead of him. She rolled and dove with impossible grace, and her wings made shockwaves in the thin air. A bolt hit her tail fin, which hurt her and sent a shock through their shared link. Kale hissed, feeling it like it was his own skin. "We have to get rid of them." Lumen's answer came as a flash of an image, a small, sleek ship with a glowing symbol that he somehow knew. "Her." Kale blinked. "You can feel her too?" "Yes, soon." Nora saw the dragonling running away on the Aurora Veil scanner. Its fusion trail was bright against the dark, but the Dominion frigate was getting closer. Drix said, "We need to stop them before they get cornered." Nora's grip on the throttle got tighter. "Wait a minute." The engines of the Aurora Veil screamed as it sped forward. She sent out a single message on every open frequency, using both human and alien harmonics. "Eris, come home." Kale heard it like a whisper in his head. Lumen's wings shook in the middle of the flight, and their bond rang with a note of pure recognition. "Mom." Kale's chest hurt when he suddenly understood. "That's her voice, right?" Lumen's answer was a triumphant roar that echoed through the night. The Aurora Veil came into view, smooth and silver against the stars. "They found us," Kale said, his voice full of wonder and relief. But the Dominion frigate was still behind them, guns ready to fire. "Get ready," Kale yelled as Lumen turned sharply toward the Aurora Veil. When Nora saw the dragon with golden eyes fly toward her ship, her heart raced. "I've got you," she whispered as her fingers flew over the docking sequence. Just as Lumen folded her wings and slammed into the docking bay with Kale still on her back, Drix set up a magnetic field. The hatch closed just as a plasma blast hit the outside of the hole. Except for the hissing of cooling metal, there was no noise in the bay. Nora stumbled forward, her eyes wide as the dragonling lowered its head. "Eris," she said, her voice shaking. The hatchling chirped, a sound of happiness and recognition that filled the room like music. Nora's eyes then turned to the person who was getting off of it. A young man in Dominion black armor with a helmet under his arm. His face showed signs of exhaustion and determination. "Who are you?" she asked. Kel looked her in the eye, his chest heaving. The person who didn't want to see her became a weapon. Drix stepped in between them, all forearms ready. But Nora raised a hand. "It's okay," she said softly, never taking her eyes off of Kale. Before anyone could say anything else, alarms went off. Drix looked at the console. Several Dominion ships are on their way. This time they won't back down. Nora's thoughts were racing. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and stuck. But when she looked back at her sat Lumen, she didn't see fear. She saw a steady, blazing determination. The dragonling's golden eyes shone like the sun's. It whispered into all of their minds at once. Kel looked Nora in the eye. "Looks like we're all in this together." Nora felt the truth settle in her chest like a spark. "Then we fight for her, for all of us." Outside the viewport, the dark of space lit up with the first signs of a war that was coming. The Aurora Veil shook when another plasma round hit the outside hull. Alarms went off loudly in the narrow halls, and red lights flashed like heartbeats that were racing. Drix said, "We can't outrun them," and his forearms flew across the tactical console. "An entire Dominion attack group is coming together." Nora tightened her harness in the pilot's chair and stared at the enemy ships coming toward her. They looked like black knives against the starfield. "Then we don't run," she said. "We think." Kale steadied himself against the vibrating deck plates behind her. Lumen crouched low in the docking bay, her golden eyes fierce and her wings twitching with barely contained power. Kale could feel her growing determination through their link, like a storm about to break. Drix said, "They'll disable us before we get to Slipstream. Even your hatchling can't take a direct hit." Nora looked at Kale. "You know how they work. Tell me that their formation has a hole in it." Kale looked at the holographic display, which showed Dominion attack pods that looked like a deadly chessboard. "The Iron Scepter, their command cruiser, keeps track of all fleet movements. Take it out, and the rest will scatter long enough for us to jump." "And how do we take it out with just one small ship?" Nora asked. Kel's eyes moved to Lumen. The dragoning raised her head, and a wave of blue-white plasma ran across her wings. Her mind voice pulsed together. The plan was crazy, almost like it was going to kill someone. That was exactly why it might work. Drix sent all of the shield's power to forward deflection, and Kale strapped himself into a flight harness on Lumen's back. Nora typed a countdown into the Aurora Veil systems so that she could follow their path through whatever chaos happened. The Dominion fleet's advancing formation lit up the empty space outside as the hangar doors yawned open. With a loud crack of ionized air, Lumen jumped out, and her wings snapped wide open. Kel's breath caught when the cold light of space surrounded them. He felt every surge of energy as she sped up and dodged enemy fire with impossible grace through the Neuralink. There was a lot of confusion in the Dominion fleet. Fighters broke off to intercept, and their plasma cannons left trails of violet light in the dark. "Hold steady," Kale whispered, even though his knuckles were white against the harness. Lumen dove under a barrage of fire, rolled through a group of surprised interceptors, and shot up toward the Iron Scepter. Every time she flapped her wings, she left behind trails of ether light that dazzled and confused the people who were chasing her. She passed closer. Kale looked at the flagship's shape, which was sleek, huge, and full of weapons. "Hit the command ray," he said, and she agreed. She answered with a rush of electric excitement. Nora and Drix followed the dragonling's path on the Aurora Veil, and the ship shook from near-miss hits. Nora whispered, "She's going straight for their heart." The glow of the screens showed up in Drix's black eyes. If they live, so do we. The iron scepter grew bigger, and its energy shields glowed like an angry halo. Kel could feel the static from its defense grid on his skin. He muttered, "Time to be great." Lumen folded her wings tightly and dove like a comet. At the last second, she sent a strong ether pulse from the crystal in her chest. The beam cut through the empty space and hit the flagship's shield nexus. A bright shockwave flared up, making everything round it look white. The Dominion's formation shook as the command network shorted out, sending up a shower of purple sparks. The fleet broke up in a flash of chaos. Kale yelled with excitement, his heart racing. "You did it!" But their victory didn't last long. A second cruiser came out of the wreckage's shadow. It was a hidden reserve ship with its cannons already aimed. A single, huge plasma lance shot toward them. Lumen turned sharply, and Kale barely had time to brace himself. The shot grazed her right wing, sending pieces of metal and sparks flying into space. Pain shot through their link, so strong that it took Kel's breath away. "I am here," he said in a gasp. "Wait a minute." Lumen steadied, but her flight wavered. A flicker of determination came through the bond. Not done. Even though she was hurt, she pulled in energy, and the other heart burned like a tiny star. Kel could feel its rhythm in his chest, like a heartbeat that was the same as his own. She let out another surge, a huge arc of blue-white plasma that cut through the hull of the reserve cruiser. The ship exploded in a beautiful, sullen bloom of fire. The Dominion fleet broke up completely and ran round in a panic. Nora took advantage of the moment and shot the Aurora Veil toward the coordinates Kale had sent. Drix said, "Jump window forming." Nora saw Lumen and Kale streak toward them through the trees. The Dragonling's hurt wing was still glowing faintly. "Open the bay," she said, as the Aurora Veil snapped into slipstream. The Dominion armada disappeared behind a curtain of bending starlight. Lumen dove through the magnetic field. The only sounds in the bay were the hissing of cooling metal and Lumen's heavy breathing. Kale slipped out of the harness, and his knees gave out from the pain they had shared. Nora ran forward with wide eyes. "Are you both?" Kale said. "We're alive." His voice rough but steady. Lumen lowered her head to Nora, and her golden eyes glowed softly. Nora reached out and put a shaky hand on the smooth plating of her work. "You saved us all," she said softly. There was a soft hum in the room, thankfulness, trust, something deeper than words could say. Later, in the dim light of the ship's mess hall, Nora looked at Kayla across the table. "You put everything on the line," she said. "Why?" Kayla looked her in the eye, tired but not afraid. "Because she's not just a weapon, and maybe I am too." Nora smiled a little bit. "Then we keep her safe, together." Drix came in before Kale could answer, and his voice had a new tension. "The Dominion will not stop. Next time, the Chancellor will come himself, and he will bring more than just ships." Nora's stomach got tight. "We'll be ready." Kale turned to the docking bay where Lumen was sleeping. Her other heart lit up the hallway with a soft light. He felt her thoughts touch him like a warm breeze. "Not over." He nodded slowly. He whispered, "No, not even close." Outside the slipstream window, the stars stretched and folded, going on forever and never being able to be known. The Dominion was planning its next move in that huge dark space. The other heart beat like a promise of both hope and war deep inside Lumen's chest. The Aurora Veil fell from the bright corridor of slipstream into the dark, quiet space. The stars sparkled like a field of cold fire. For a moment, the quiet was almost peaceful, but then the proximity alarms started to sound. Drix's upper arms flew across the console, while his lower arms kept the ship steady. "Several contacts. They've figured out where we're going to leave from. The Dominion has come." Nora Hayes felt her stomach drop. "Already. How?" They must have put trace beacons in the slipstream, Drix said with a frown. They knew where we were going. Kale, still strapped into the co-pilot's seat, looked at the long-range display. There were dozens of red blips that flashed across the grid, but one signature stood out from the rest. A ship the size of a floating city, with an energy signature that pulsed like a six-star. He said softly, "The Obsidian Wraith." Varus came himself. Behind them, Lumen stood up from her crouch in the docking bay. The other heart glowed brighter than ever, and the dragonling's golden eyes shone with a fierce light. Kale could feel her readiness through the null link, a vibration of defiance that hummed in his bones. Fight. Together, she whispered into their minds. Nora took a deep breath. Then we take our stand. The Obsidian Wraith came out of the dark, holding an obsidian blade against the stars. A deadly halo of 1,000 smaller Dominion ships spread out. High Chancellor Varus watched the Aurora Veil from the command deck of the flagship. His eyes were like polished iron, hit the human ship. He said in a voice that was as cold as space, "Get me the hatchling alive. Get rid of everything else." The first shot hit like a thunderclap. Plasma lances shot through the empty space and hit the forward shields of the Aurora Veil. The deck shook hard, and sparks flew from pipes overhead. 70% shields, Drix yelled. Nora clenched her teeth. "Kale, what are my options?" He looked over the tactical ray, his heart racing. "It's too hard to get through their fleet. We have to break up their formation and make things chaotic." He looked at Lumen. The draggling bent her neck back so that her golden eyes met his. Yes, a few minutes later, the hangar doors opened to the cold void. Kale climbed into the flight harness, and every move was full of purpose. Nora held onto his arm. "You don't have to do this by yourself." "I'm not," Kale said, looking at Lumen. "We are all in this together." The dragonling crouched down, and its wings lit up with other light. With a burst of energy, she shot into the void, and Kale held on tight. Dominion interceptors swarmed like angry bees. Lumen dove and rolled, her metal wings cutting through the dark. Plasma bolts flew by as Kale sent targeting information directly through their link. "Now left," he thought. Lumen banked hard and let out a bright arc of energy that tore through an enemy squadron. The wreckage spun out in silent blue fire explosions. Nora watched the display of impossible grace and power from the Aurora Veil. "She's beautiful," she said softly. Drix changed the comms, "and she's getting the Chancellor's attention." Varus leaned forward on the Obsidian Wraith, his eyes narrowing. "Very good." But it was easy to guess. He held up a hand with claws. "Put the null net to use from the flagship." A huge lattice of dark energy spread out like a black spider web. It had a lightless void around its edges that was meant to cut off power from any life form that used energy. Kale felt the trap before he saw it. The psychic link suddenly got cold, like someone had slammed a door on a star. Lumen's flight slowed down, and her bright trails got dimmer. "They're taking all your energy." Kale yelled, "Can't hold." Her mental voice wavered, like a signal that was fading. Kale's thoughts raced. The null net was attached to a big generator in the middle of the flagship. It was big, but not unbreakable. He said, "If we take out the core, the net falls apart." Lumen weakly banked toward the ship that was coming up. The Aurora Veil shot in behind them, with Drix at the helm with deadly accuracy. He said over the radio, "We can cover your approach, but you have to be quick." "Got it," Kale said. The Aurora Veil fired a lot of counterstrikes, which drew enemy fire and plasma fire across the void. Lumen gathered the last of her fading strength and folded her wings for a lightning-fast dive toward the Obsidian Wraith. Gun turrets and sensor rays covered the surface of the flagship. Kale led Lumen to a narrow maintenance trench that was full of dark energy. This was the null net spine. "Right there," Kale yelled. Lumen let loose the full power of the other heart with a roar that shook Kale's bones. A spear of light so bright that it hurt her eyes shot out of her chest and hit the trench. For a second, nothing happened. Then the whole building shook. A wave of collapsing energy tore through the Dominion fleet. The null net broke apart, and its black strands turned into a cloud of fading sparks. Lumen's body filled with power again, and her eyes lit up with new fire. She sang the word free into Kel's mind, and it rang like a victory bell. Kel laughed out loud, and the tension broke. Now let's get this done. But Varros wasn't done yet. He turned on a last weapon from the Obsidian Wraith's command deck, an experimental singularity cannon that was supposed to turn matter into a tiny black hole. A dark core started to grow at the front of the flagship, eating up the light round it. Kel saw the void growing and felt the pull pulling at his very atoms. "They'll kill us all just to win," he said in a low voice. Lumen floated in the air, narrowing her eyes. They saw an image through their bond, the other heart shining brighter than ever and letting go of everything it held. "No," Kel said, and a sudden fear rose in him. You won't make it through that," she said simply. Together, Kel's throat got tight. "We're going to do this smart if we do it. We aim for the core of their weapon and then run. Do you hear me? We run." A pulse of agreement warmed his mind. They shot toward the flagship's cannon, avoiding streams of distorted gravity. The singularity pulsed like a black sun, and its edges chewed on the stars. "Closer, closer," Kel whispered, leading Lumen with every beat of his heart. At the last second, she let out a burning stream of ether energy that was pure, bright, and unstoppable. The blast went right through the cannon's containment field. For a short time, the universe was quiet. Then, the Obsidian Wraith burst into a huge explosion of light and shadow. The forming singularity fell inward, eating the flagship in a loud crash of gravity. Shockwaves hit the Dominion fleet, scattering ships like leaves in a storm. They ran into the endless dark, broken and without a leader. Kel held onto the harness as Lumen pulled away from the gravity well that was collapsing after the explosion. The force hit them hard, but her wings stayed strong, each beat powered by the last bits of the other heart. The void was quiet again when they finally got free, except for the sound of two hearts beating as one. Hours later, the survivors met in the quiet docking bay of the Aurora Vale. Lumen lay on the deck, breathing slowly but steadily. The other heart glowed softly, like a warm, steady pulse instead of a bright flash. Nora came closer, her eyes wide with wonder. "You saved more than this ship," she said softly. "You might have stopped the war before it really started." Kel put a hand on Lumen's neck. "She made her own choice. It wasn't fate. It was choice." Drix tilted his head, and the dragonling's soft light shone off his black eyes. "The Dominion will think twice before going after you again. But their hunger won't go away that easily." Nora nodded. "We'll be ready then. We keep her safe and what she stands for." Kel looked at her, and they both understood each other without saying a word. Later, when the others were asleep, Kel sat next to Lumen by himself. He could feel her tiredness through their bond, but he also felt a deep, lasting peace. He whispered, "You did it. We did it." Her golden eyes opened, and they were faintly glowing. Together, Kel smiled and leaned back against her warm metal side. He felt at home for the first time since he was a child in the cold halls of the Dominion academies. The stars burned quietly, endlessly, and waited above them, outside the viewport. The Dominion was still plotting somewhere, but Kel knew they would never see the hatchling as just a weapon again. Because she wasn't. She was Lumen, the child of starlight and steel, born free and blazing her own path through the galaxy. Kel had found something better than winning or getting revenge with her: freedom. The other heart beat in time with their shared breath, promising light that even the darkest darkness could never put out.